Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Spill the Tea. Today, I kind of wanted to talk about a real sensitive topic, and it's something that quietly erodes relationships. But people always don't know how to name it. And again, this is a very sensitive topic, and that's what happens when someone consistently points out your flaws, but very rarely acknowledges your growth, your effort, or your wins. They never give you, I guess, that level of respect, you can call it. This isn't about attacking anyone, it's about awareness on both sides. Healthy relationships quite frequently require feedback. Avoiding hard conversations, doesn't create safety, it creates a distance between the two people that are formulating a relationship and a foundation. But there's a big difference between guidance and constant correction. When someone only highlights, the things that you do wrong, or how you reacted to things, or what you should be doing, and they very rarely ever reflect, any kind of progress that you made, any effort that you show in a relationship, any kind of growth that you took not only for yourself but also the growth of the relationship, or any kind of work that you did to try to help either repair, the relationship, or any kind of dynamic in the outside world, whether it be friendships, whether it be a job. They never commend you on the fact that you try to repair those relationships. Your nervous system doesn't always hear support. It usually, what ends up happening is it hears, I'm never enough, or I'm not good enough. Over time, that doesn't really motivate growth. It also doesn't motivate for the progression of a relationship. What it does is it starts to create shutdown. You start to feel a level of resentment, and you are constantly being defensive. You are constantly trying to defend yourself every time you turn around. Me, myself, I've been on both sides of that. And I've been on the receiving end a lot of this aspect, especially in my past. Where I would bring something up to the table, not to control anyone, not to mold them. What I would simply say is, hey, the way that this was handled wasn't healthy. And, the response that I would always be met with is, you're trying to change me, or just accept me for who I am. And here's an honest truth that many may not want to hear. Accepting somebody doesn't mean accepting, their dysregulation, the emotional harm that they are causing, or the avoidance of the problem itself. And also, offering guidance doesn't automatically mean that we're trying to control the situation or control you or change you. The real question here is the feedback about who they are or how something landed, because those are two very different things. One other thing that I would like to talk about too is, obviously, when you get into relationships, they become your friends. That's ultimately what everyone's goal is, to have a best friend to spend the rest of their life with. And a part of spending the rest of your life with comes, joking around, making fun of each other, or as some people call it, busting balls. And another layer that people really underestimate is the humor aspect of it. Sometimes people do joke during tension, and that's how they regulate themselves. That's to help them reduce stress, to reconnect, or to soften the moment. But here's the part that matters. Even the smallest jokes carry emotional weight when someone is already feeling activated. You might mean, like, hey, I'm just playing around with you, but their nervous system hears, I'm not being taken seriously. And, that doesn't mean that humor is wrong. Obviously, people, navigate towards humor sometimes. It just means that the timing is not right. Because connection isn't just about intent, it's also about the impact that you have on that relationship. And so there are a lot of different ways that these can show up in life. If you can imagine being in a relationship and one partner, their family offers them a free place to stay, for a vacation. Maybe they have a condo or a timeshare or something. And so they go, hey, like, we'll give you this timeshare for the weekend while you travel to Florida or whatever. But then the other partner is expected to pay their entire way. On the surface, that might seem like a very small thing, but later that same partner is then told things like, hey, you're not there enough for my family. You don't show up the way that I need you to, or you're not doing enough for this relationship. What's missing from that is the acknowledgement. They're not acknowledging the fact that, the effort that they did make, or the willingness to even show up. Hey, we got a free place. How about, we share the responsibilities and I show up and we split the cost 50-50. And also, they're not also being acknowledged for, the sacrifices that they have already given towards the relationship. Maybe they are going above and beyond for that other person, even just being there, listening to them vent all the time, 24/7, and that's never being acknowledged. So instead of, that person, saying, hey, I see that you tried, the message becomes, no matter what you do, it's still not enough. And that's where the pattern starts to turn incredibly toxic, because that standard keeps moving, that goalpost, they keep moving the goalpost on you. And the person being criticized never gets to feel secure with the efforts that they do keep making. And this creates a cycle. Over time, it creates like this continuous loop. One person will constantly feel unseen. They pull back or they get incredibly defensive. The other person starts to feel even more abandoned. They start to criticize that other person even more. And the cycle just keeps going around and around and around in this huge circle. Not because either person doesn't care. It's because the effort is being measured through criticism instead of actually being acknowledged. And at some point in time, eventually that love turns into a performance instead of a partnership. Here's another way that it may show up in life. Say again you're in a relationship and there's problems inside the relationship. And one partner has the maturity level to say, hey, listen, we are not the problem, but there is a problem and it is affecting our relationship. That's somebody who's not trying to attack the relationship. What they're trying to do is protect the relationship. Let's say, for example, maybe this problem, it involves a third party, a family member or something. Maybe we'll say like that family member's problem is like the drinking is out of control. Maybe they're starting to take advantage of the household. They're not contributing. They're just doing whatever. They're creating chaos and instability. And one partner sees the problem clearly and says, hey, like this can't keep happening. It is hurting us because it's affecting, say, me or you or whoever. But then now let's say the other partner avoids it. Maybe they try to defend that person. Maybe they try to minimize it. They try to minimize it by saying things like, that's just who they are. I think that you're starting to overreact. They're not that bad. Or maybe just, I don't want to deal with it. Now it becomes no longer about the third person. It's about whether the relationship is being protected or not. This starts to now create a wound inside the relationship. The partner who decided to bring these issues to light isn't asking for any kind of control. They're asking for some sort of containment. They're asking for some sort of reciprocity to get through the problems together. And what they're trying to say is, I need to know that, our relationship comes first. Now, when that concern starts to get dismissed, that person receives that message as, this relationship is basically negotiable. Like, are we sure that we're in it to be in it? And over time, that starts to create a very high level of resentment. It starts to create emotional withdrawal. Maybe they just shut down and they don't want to talk anymore. They don't want to deal with anything. They don't want to deal with problems. They don't want to communicate with you. Or maybe on the opposite side, maybe they start exploding. Maybe they start becoming even more angrier or on edge or anything. Ultimately, it's going to lead to a level of disconnection within the relationship. And that's not because the love disappeared, it's because the safety in the relationship did. And one more reason why these could happen in life is, let's say, for example, one partner in a relationship is insecure and the other one's not as insecure. Let's say one partner says, hey, and they're very vulnerable, and they say, hey, listen, I'm very insecure. This hurts me and certain things make me feel unsafe. And so let's say, for example, that other partner listens to them. They actually adjust and they remove whatever it is that's, upsetting their partner. We'll say maybe it's social media. Maybe that person has too many social media people, and the other person feels uncomfortable and insecure, and so the opposite person, say, removes it. So they change that behavior and they create that level of safety inside the relationship, and that matters a lot. Now let's say that insecurity doesn't go away. Maybe they're just a very insecure person in general. They deal with it. So then the supportive partner, tries to encourage the other one. Maybe they say, I believe in you, that you're capable of more. I want you to be able to feel confident, not just within the relationship. I want you to feel confident outside of the relationship as well too. And say, suddenly that gets heard as, you're trying to change me, or you don't accept me for me, or you think something's wrong with me, because the other person tries to offer that encouragement. And so this is a very tough one, because insecurity has two separate parts to it. There's an external safety, say for that example, say the social media, say maybe that person's talking to other people, and their partner is not aware of it. So that's the external safety of it. But now the second part to it is the internal regulation. And this is where a lot of the misinterpretation starts to happen. A relationship can help with the first, that supportive partner can remove whatever's triggering it. Maybe they can either get rid of their social media, or maybe they can start getting rid of some of the people that are on their stuff, or maybe, they can be more transparent with who they talk to. So that way there's no secrets, there's no hidden agendas inside the relationship. So that's one way that the person can help with the external part of insecurities. But the hard pill to swallow is it cannot replace the second portion, which is the internal regulation. And so when someone isn't ready to really do their inner work and find their own confidence on themselves, even the person that is trying to support them, it can feel like pressure. And usually that encouragement can also sound like a level of judgment, and it, that level of care can also be taken as criticism. So you can remove those triggers, you can adjust the behavior, you can offer the reassurance all you want, and you can create an environment where that person is emotionally safe, and you're still not guaranteed to fix someone's relationship with themselves. And that doesn't mean that you failed, and it doesn't mean that they are broken. It just means that security itself can't be outsourced. A relationship can support levels of healing, but it can't do the work for someone else. So some people grew up where love, where they were always corrected, and that's how, love showed up, where they were always corrected. Other people, grew up starving for validation. They want that recognition, they want that attention, they want that acknowledgement. So one person, thinks, hey, listen, I'm just trying to help you grow, while the other one starts to feel like I'm never seen. And neither person is automatically wrong, but without that level of awareness, the pattern continuously repeats. And patterns, not people, are usually the real problem. That's where the problem lies. There's always one person's perspective, the other person's perspective, and then when you combine both of them together is where the truth is found. And when you start to find the balance of that, that's where healthy relationships, you start to realize they can do both. They can address harmful behavior and acknowledge the growth both within inside a relationship. They can offer guidance and the growth of evolution towards your relationship, and they can respect your autonomy and everything like that. Also, you can have hard conversations, you can name the hard truths, but you can also still, in the same aspect, reinforce the safety. If feedback only points downward and they only talk down on you, the relationship starts to collapse. If validation, ignores the harm, the relationship starts to stagnate. And so that's where growth in the relationship lives, in the middle of it. I know that this was a very sensitive topic to talk about, and I wasn't trying to offend anyone. If this does hit home, it's not about who's to blame. It's about becoming consciously aware of how feedback is giving and how it's received. Awareness is what turns, conflict into growth instead of that distance within the relationship. If you would like to go deeper into conversations of such like this and where all of this started to resonate from, my book called The Child Called Home will be out very shortly. This is also where, this channel, Spill the Tea, was created for, with these tough conversations and being able to share lived experiences and to gather valuable information from everyone. I also created a Gumroad link with it's a little guide that I created. It's called If You Found This at the Right Time. The link in that is below as well too. I'm hoping that this resonated, and I just want everyone to know that you're not alone and you're just becoming more aware. Thank you guys, and I hope you guys have a great day.